Half a century ago, Nigeria continued its journey to greatness as the Civil War ended. As the nation heals, the ideas and ideals of a developing nation persist. How much has changed since 1970? Should the history and lessons of Biafra be rewritten? Well, tonight to discuss national unity, progress and achievements post-Biafra is Babajide Ogunsanwo. Good to have you on the program.
It's always a pleasure to be here.
All right. Talking about 50 years post-Biafra, today, does Nigeria now have a recipe for national unity, would you say?
Recipe, perhaps we could ask the first civilian president after Biafra if he had a recipe. And yes, late President Shagari had a recipe. He had 5 things that he said was the recipe to unity and prosperity in Nigeria. And I'll share those 5 things with you tonight. And I think it will surprise you. But before I do that, there's some question that we need to answer tonight, and that is, how many people living in today's Nigeria were alive in 1970? And the National Bureau of Statistics gives us the answer. They say, indeed, they tell us that only 9% of Nigerians are today above the age of 50. In other words, 91% of those living in Nigeria today were not born when that war ended. So the lesson is, more than ever before, we need to ensure that we write our history accurately. Because as the years have gone by, there are fewer people that are alive to tell the accurate story of what happened half a century ago. But let's quickly look at what the late president had shared as his 5 secrets to unity and prosperity in Nigeria. And this was in 1980 when he became president. And he said 5 things: peace, love, understanding, prosperity, and liberty. And based on the president's advice, he was strong in those words that these were the 5 things that will lead, and that was his blueprint for peace and prosperity in Nigeria. Now that we've looked at that, the second thing that we should take a look at is what has really been the progress between 1914 and 1970 and 1970 to date. In other words, how have we created and reformed the country? And if we take a careful look at that, we'll see that from 1914, yes, we had the amalgamation of 2 protectorates into one country. And then we moved to that year, 1939, when then Bernard Bodilon created 3 regions. And that was the northern, the eastern, and the western region. That was the first time Nigeria had 3 regions, 1939. In 1969, we then went from 3 regions to 4 regions. That was when the Midwestern region was created. In 1967, we went from 4 regions to 12 states, and then we went from 12 states in 1976 to 19 states, and the journey continued and continued. But what does all of this mean? If we follow and carefully study our history between 1914 to 1970 and after 1970, the summary is there really was no civilian president that created any state in Nigeria. All the states that we have in today's Nigeria were all created by a military president. In other words, this and the concerns we've had is really not about favoritism or nepotism. There are some structural challenges that were created not by civilian presidents, but by history of military leaders. And those are the areas and those are the linkages that we need to correct. Now that we have 36 states, we now need to look at how can we ensure that these states produce prosperity for Nigerians.
And perhaps that's what I was going to ask, linking the creation of those states at those times for those regions to what national unity should look like in the future. Because many people have said inclusive governance, that some regions, some individuals feel left out. But how can we ensure that everyone is catered to?
2 words: developing potential. You know, speaking about regions, now that we have the facts that shows that no state was created by a civilian president. It all started from regions. Let's look at the regional perspective of this, of the opportunities within the country. And if we take a look at that, yes, we know that across all these regions, we generated 1.1 trillion naira internally generated revenue. But the evidence, if we look at it from those three regional perspectives, the northern, the eastern, and the western region, which is our real foundation, today what we have is that the western region accounts for 53% of all money generated internally. The northern region accounts for 26%, and the eastern region accounts for only 21%. So the secret and the unity and the programs for the future should be to ensure that we create a more even balance among all the regions. That is where the secret lies, and that is developing potential across all the states and across the regions. As it is today, most opportunities are concentrated based on the evidence we have in the western region, and we need to create more opportunities in the north and in the east. But in all, I remember the words of American industrialist Henry Ford, who said that coming together is the beginning. As Nigeria come together, yes, we have. Henry Ford continues by saying, keeping together is progress. Are we keeping together? Yes, we are. But finally, Henry Ford says, working together is success. And the evidence we have today, based on all what we've discussed, is Nigeria has come together, Nigeria has kept together, but we now need to work together.
But if there was one thing, sadly, you don't have a crystal ball, but you have a football, that you would say government should focus on to achieve a prosperous nation, what would that be?
Developing everyone's potential. But let's look at it from a different perspective. If national unity were to be a penalty kick, what has it been in the last half a century, in the last 5 decades since 1970? Has it been over the bar? Did it hit the post? Or have our leaders scored a goal? And based on the evidence we have, based on Henry Ford's definition of coming together and keeping together, yes, I think we've seen that penalty kick being scored, and yes, we've made significant progress. Our future and our focus now should be to make sure that we work together, because we've come together, we've kept together. This is now the decade that we must work together for everyone's prosperity. All
right, many thanks, Bolaji Dangosowo, for sharing your insights and analysis on the news at 10.
The pleasure is all mine, Millicent.